You also talk about a company called the Maid Company.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories in the book.
Yes,
yeah, sure.
And that helps employ poor women as domestic help, but also gives them partial ownership into the company, something that's rarely seen.
That's right.
How has the owner actually made this happen? What are some of the things that she's done, and what have been some of the outcomes of that?
I think the owner, this lady called Gauri Singh, had a really good idea, which is she said that Indians need domestic labor. Domestic labor is one of the safest places for women from underprivileged backgrounds in India to work at. Because otherwise, if women are sent to work in either factories or say, which often happens, real estate sites, right? Like building locations, right? The labor is really hard, right? Often it interferes with the sort of social goals that the woman might have, including bearing a child and so on and so forth. The exploitation is huge, right? In fact, working domestically is one of the safest environments because you can structure the work, you can expand and contract the working hours and so on and so forth, right? But there was exploitation there too, right? So how do you challenge that? And she had this wonderful idea where she said, look, it'll only work in the future if you stop thinking of domestic labor as servants. You have to think of domestic labor as service. So what does she do? She created this entire organization where she said, look, I don't provide any servants. You want a well-run household, and being, working couples and so on and so forth, you don't have the time to run it yourself. I will provide you trained employees who will work like employees. So they will not, number one, they will not work 24/7, right? They will not work without a break. They will not work infinite number of hours. They won't stay with you and pop up whenever you want them. They will come and do X number of tasks whenever and are stipulated in the contract, right? So what used to happen in India is your quote unquote servant would do everything. Your servant would take care of the young child also, walk the dog also, water the plants also, cook your food also. She said that's rubbish, because if you want trained labor, those people are trained for a particular thing. Right? So cook is a trained cook. You can't then say, oh, the cook will come and they will, take care of the child also. Because a trained nanny is a trained nanny. That's what the nanny has been trained for. So she created this wonderful company which breaks all these things up. And the place that she does it is a place called Gurgaon, which is this new township that's come out in the last 10, 15 years in India, where most people working there are, urban, middle class people, usually, both the people in the home, the man and the woman, they're both working, they don't have time, so on and so forth. And she provides employees who go, they're trained, they do specific tasks for X number of hours every day. They have very fixed sort of working services and contracts, which is they have to have either Saturday or Sunday off. They will not work beyond a particular time. If you buy a service pattern which says they will only work for 2 hours, they will only work for 2 hours. You cannot ask them to stay back. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's the future. You look at that model and you're like, this is the future, right? Because you can't have a system where, your servants are there for you all the time. That's rubbish. They have a personal life, right? And when you deprive them of their personal life, that's when you have a problem, because you're essentially depriving a whole bunch of people from having any personal aspiration because they're in service to you, right? That shouldn't be the case. There's a wonderful thing she says, and I want to mention this. She said, when women come to work with us and after they work with us for some time, their spine straightens. So she said, usually these women from very poor backgrounds and, often in exploitative relationships with patriarchy are so used to being beaten into subservience that almost physically their posture becomes bent. When you finally give them empowered training and you give them financial responsibility and financial freedom, slowly by slowly they learned to give it back, right? And as they learn to give it back, their spine straightens. So literally it's like a physical posture of somebody straightening. I mean, what a beautiful imagery that is. It's the greatest example of modern India and what modern India is. It's a country slowly straightening its spine after many years of global subservience. So to me, that's an incredible idea, and I was delighted to write about that story because if that doesn't define the Indian dream, I don't know what does.